All right, welcome everyone to the first episode or discussion and also this. Hope everyone is hunkered down at home during this long winter break. And I want to thank Jeremy for being willing to be the kind of first person on this. And I'll just say just kind of how this came about, why I wanted to talk to him. And I have this line Jeremy's heard me use before, but some of you haven't. So when Hollywood makes a movie about our department, Jeremy gets to be played by Ryan Gosling, not just because of the facial hair that comes on and off, but because, like Gosling, who was preparing for a role in La La Land, Jeremy taught himself to play piano over this relatively short, intense period of time. Now, when that movie about our department gets made, I'm hoping to be played by The Rock, but I'm going to have to do some serious weightlifting to make that happen. However, anyway, since Jeremy did start learning, he's gone on to play keyboards in a local band, and that during the pandemic, even performed at the Gallagher Blue Door stage. And I've just been really interested in how this happened all of a sudden. This maybe it wasn't all of a sudden, but picking up this new instrument as an adult. So, anyways, now I have a perfect excuse to hear more about it. So, I'll throw things over to Jeremy just to talk a little bit, maybe play a little bit, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. I have a cup of tea. That's how I know when we're done. My cup of tea will be gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Jim, for inviting me. I'm glad to talk about this. I'm also happy to admit that I am not actually a musician. I just pretend to be. But this is kind of also what I tell, like when I'm talking to students about becoming an academic, becoming a writer. Half of it is just believing in your own authority. So yes, I am a writer. I'm pretending to be a musician, and I think that has allowed me actually to play music, oddly enough. Like the first time I started sitting down to play the piano, it's like terrifying because I'm just like I'm a toddler. I've known nothing. I know music theory. I've known like things about music, but I never had a piano. And so like, in some ways, I feel like that's a life lesson. Just pretend you're good at it. And eventually you become competent at least. I even had trouble claiming competence in some ways, mostly because the more you know about something, the more you don't know, whether it's, an art form or some, philosophy or about just life in general. So I do come at this with, I hope, some humility. I love playing on the piano. And I've always been attracted to it, but I'm sitting here at this piano. This was my grandfather's piano. He was also self-taught. He played by ear. He did not play any of the black keys. He transposed everything to C, did not play any black keys, only played on the white keys. He said, I play by ear. And he would make the joke where he act like he's playing by ear. So this was the piano I remember when I was a kid. When I was a really, really young kid, I remember they had, my grandparents had a big player piano that had been gutted, but he would play on that. And eventually it got replaced with this one, which was sort of in the family. So he kind of inherited that from another person in the family. And I remember we got that old player piano, this old gutted player piano in my house when I was really young, and it was in our basement. And I didn't have lessons, and I had always wanted to have lessons. I always wanted to learn how to play. It just wasn't a priority. I played baseball rather than learn piano. But I remember sitting down there and getting a book, trying to teach myself with a book. And I was like plunking out Skip to My Lou. I had sort of no concept of the theory of music or how songs are put together. And eventually that old player piano, the ivories were chipped off. There were keys that didn't work. And that piano ended up just completely falling apart. We put it in our barn, and it was like this sort of specter in my life of this sort of like broken down piano with the keys that looked like a sort of broken smile staring at me like, you'll never learn to play piano, and so and so then this piano, it's a different memory because I remember my grandfather playing it when I was a kid. And I remember being down at his feet here, he'd be drinking a beer, playing piano, singing songs, and I was just a little kid sort of watching what's going on. But he would never let us kids touch his piano. He's like, you're not allowed to play the piano. He didn't want it to be messed up at all. And in fact, you can't really, maybe you can see it, but right here, there's a little hole and a hole here. He locked this piano. he would not let kids play on it. He put a little padlock on there. And so I grew up wanting to play piano and not being allowed to for various reasons, or not even feeling like I had the opportunity. And, I had a little Casio growing up, we got for Christmas one time, but that's not really playing piano. And so one of the reasons I wanted to sit here at this piano is to tell that little bit of story, because as Jim knows and other people who know, I go to Zoom meetings now, and I'm in my garage, in the office above my garage, and that's where our band practices. And I have my Yamaha keyboard, and it probably would have been an easier setup, but I wanted to show this piano because of that story. And I had an opportunity to get this from my parents. My grandfather had died years ago, and it was at my parents' house. And then, it was just before my sabbatical, the PDA, and my uncle had died. And so I was going back to the funeral, and, Adrian, my wife, and kids, it was like short notice, so they weren't accompanying me. So I was going back to this funeral, and I thought, I have a van. I might be able to fit that piano in the van. And so I took out all the seats, and I took this opportunity because my parents don't play piano. It was just a piece of furniture. And so when I, went to the funeral, my dad and my brother helped me load this into the van. And it was so out of tune. It was just embarrassingly how out of tune it was. And at this point, I didn't know how to play piano either. It was just like, it was an invitation. Finally, that, like that old fallen in piano from the barn has come back to life, and the lock was taken off of the keys, And so I had this opportunity to bring it home. And I remember, Jim, just before my PDA started, you were, I can't remember exactly how you said this, but you said your PDA could be really transformative. And I think you were talking about, like getting in, like exercising, and like sort of getting a sort of more well-rounded feeling of your life in the world. And I took that to heart, actually, because I actually started exercising more regularly then, and I felt good about it. I also had this piano in my life, and I thought, what better way to spend some of that time? I was diligently working on the project I proposed, and it was successful, and I got published. No, don't worry about that. And then, between times when I would read and write, I would come over to the piano and I would plunk out, oh, that's a C chord. I know what a C chord is. Okay, yeah. And I can make it minor. I just lower the third, or I can make a 7 chord and, put that 7 note on it. And I knew all those in theory, but then before I was sitting down before the piano, I didn't really have a sense of what it felt like to produce those chords. And actually, that is the way I learned to play piano, which was, I knew theoretically what a chord was. It was 3 notes, 1, 3, 5. And I counted how many there were. And then eventually I picked up this little piano chord dictionary, and I started like finding other chords. And I would learn that, you play E minor like this, or you could invert it and have a different way to play the same chord. So it was really an intellectual, abstract exercise on one hand. And on the other hand, it was a meditative practice that it could let me kind of, relax, between the reading and writing and the work I was doing. And I was home alone, and I'd exercise, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit down and sort of meditate at the piano. So it was abstract and intellectual. And then it was also kind of a in the body meditative thing. And then it was also just really goddamn fun. It was just fun to play songs and learn new songs. So I don't know, that's sort of the origin story. I'm happy to, if you have any other questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. I'll also, I'm sure, play at some point.
Wow, you're going to have to write an essay about that. I will give you the transcript to all this when we're done.
Yeah, and this is actually, I hadn't anticipated telling that story about the player piano, but I recently wrote a poem called Piano, and it's sort of this dreamlike poem in which I do have this strange piano appear, and it's kind of a ghostly horror image as much as anything. And I hadn't realized I was sort of tapping into this narrative of my life. It was just sort of this image in my head. It's like sort of iconic. But right now I'm sitting at this piano. There's no lock on it, and I still feel the I say I don't play piano. I'm not really a musician because I can kind of figure out how to read music in the same way, like I can sort of sound things out. I can figure out what the notes are, and I can play it enough by ear that I pick things up. But I still feel that lack of actual training. And I know there are people who are trained, like on this Zoom call, people who are trained musicians, and I envy that training. And so Hattie, my daughter, who's 8 years old, this is the piano she's taking her lessons on. And she sits here with the computer on Zoom as her teacher teaches her things. And she has these little books here. I feel like I'm looking at these books and I hear her play and I'm like, she's reading that. She's not trying to pick it out. That's just in her body. It's like part of her voice now. Like she just knows it. And I don't. I have to sort of I sort of figure it out. So I feel like it's kind of cool that we both play piano, but I feel like I'm giving her a kind of different foundation for it. For me, it feels, I don't know, a little looser than what I hope it is for her. She'll have a more reliable relationship to it, maybe.
Well, let me ask you one question, then throw it open to people. But can you talk a little bit about playing with the band? Because you're making it sound like, oh, I just kind of figured things out. But I've seen you guys play, and all of a sudden, you have a song you rehearse, and they're like, no, we're going to change the key for this, and you're like right all over it. So I think you're underselling your skills here.
Yeah, and maybe that's partly just like being able to hear things a little differently, I guess, or just being aware of the song and like actually feeling like I have a relationship to songs as much more than I do to the music itself. And also, by the way, I'll show you how the books that I've learned with. You can fake a lot, especially if you have a band with horns and a bass and drums, and I'm like, okay, I know that's a C7 with a flatted ninth, but I think I'll just play the C7 chord and no one's going to hear the difference, So in the spur of the moment, I can fake through it enough. And I also feel like, so, I play, I feel like I play the way a self-taught guitarist plays, which is you learn shapes and rhythm, and I know how the song is put together, but I'm not going to shred a solo. I can't. I just can't. Maybe I would be able to if I tried, but I'd rather learn a new song, I think, with what I have right now and sort of have another relationship to like an old Hoagie Carmichael song than like practice a scale and like get really good at playing a melody. So I'd rather like sort of, oh, there's this new song or this new old song I've never played before. But I'll tell you about the origin of the band. When I first started plunking out chords, a friend of mine, Justin Holmes, he's a bass player, guitarist, wonderful musician. He teaches in political science, and we came in together in 2008. We were hired in the same cohort, and we had played music sort of briefly when I just played like some guitar and bass with him, and he played guitar. It was just like a get together. In fact, Grant Tracy's not here, but we played once in his basement. But that was sort of a short-lived thing. And when I told him I was starting to play piano, I was like, oh, I'm looking for somebody to play with. And so he brought his bass over and set it next to the piano, and I was playing some chords and he would play stuff. And then he said he had a friend who works at John Deere who sings, and he was looking to play some, he really liked Michael Bublé and Harry Connick Jr. and some of the revival of the old jazz standards. And those were exactly the songs I was playing. There was something about jazz standards like Duke Ellington and Rodgers and Hart songs, or, Cole Porter, some of these songs that felt so much more interesting to me than like pop songs, which I love, like I love a Beatles song as much as the next person. I love a Billy Joel song as much as the next person, but these were the songs I was sort of attracted to because I didn't understand them until I started playing them. And so Justin said, hey, we got this friend. He came over, he started singing, and we're like, from there, that was sort of the core trio of the band. And then there was a guy who moved from Texas who played drums. He's an excellent drummer. And he started playing with us, and then a couple of horns joined us. And from there, it just sort of built up. And I have to also say, like, I'm not the star of the show. I'm really, really happy to be like the supporting player to people who do have like deep musical knowledge or just inherent musical talent. Like our singer is fantastic. Some of you have heard him sing before. He's just a natural talent. He's got a great voice, a great stage persona. And so that was the origin. We started playing jazz standards. And then of course, as we got our first gigs, people wanted us to play songs they knew. And so not everyone really can like jam out to The Way You Look Tonight. They're not gonna be like, don't get around much anymore, I'm gonna like dance. No, they wanted to hear Prince or they want to hear, Coldplay or, so we've added a lot of rock and pop to our repertoire, to our set list. Some Motown. I feel like that's a good, like soul and R&B is a good in between the rock and pop and the jazz standard. So we find some like overlap there in soul and R&B songs. So that's sort of the origin of the band. And, I feel lucky that that we found each other. It feels like just fortuitous, Yeah. So I would highly recommend anyone to start a band.
The classic punk, call to arms.
Yeah.
Hey, so before we make Jeremy play, anyone want to ask a question?
I'm curious how heavy that piano is. Jeremy, is this like a basic, like non-movable piece of furniture, or is this, I can't quite tell how small of it, because you picked it up and put it in a van?
It's not terribly big. I don't play this in the band.
Okay.
But when I first started, Justin would sit here behind me. Actually, it was in the house that I lived in before. And I would play on the acoustic piano. Then I ended up buying an electric piano, the Yamaha. And I have my eye on a new one. I'll save up for my next sabbatical.
So we were going to make you play something.
Yeah, I'll play something. I don't know quite what to play because I'm not like, as I said, I'll play a song. I haven't, by the way, I'll pause here to say, I haven't been playing piano much during the pandemic, even though I'm up in my office a lot in the garage. You guys know, if you've seen me at meetings, like I have a drum set behind me, and I feel like I've taken advantage of the pandemic that I've taught myself drums recently. And I've always wanted to play. It's the same goddamn story. I've always wanted to play drums. I've just never had a drum set. And what are you going to do? Like buy a $500 drum set just to see if you're any good at it? So I happen to have this drum set and I was like, I can play this. And then, and then trying to do the little fills and stuff. So I haven't played piano. I might be embarrassingly bad right now. I'll play around a little bit. This song, Don't Get Around Much Anymore, this Duke Ellington song. And, one of the things I really liked about learning piano, as I said, is I liked jazz when I was in high school, but I would listen to bebop, and bebop may as well just like, you start the song, you play the melody, and then you're off on your own. And, it may be completely far away from the original song, but like getting back to the origins of what how these songs are put together felt like, it felt like it was new. It wasn't cool. It was just new. It was new to me. I'll also say, by the way, like I got a thumb piano. I've got this. Jim, I wanted you to get your harmonica out too. I've got this melodica. And I started playing piano because I started playing this ukulele. And I got this book called The Daily Ukulele. And in it, they have all of these arrangements of songs, right? So this isn't actually real music. They adapted it for the purpose of playing on the ukulele. And then I realized when I was playing piano, I could just take the ukulele book and figure out those chords. That's how I started. And then I picked up this fake book, which is much bigger and has a lot of songs in it. And then this real book, Jazz Standards, which is basically the same thing, so I could pick up and learn I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart, even though it's, I'm not playing it properly. I'm just like figuring out where my hands go. That was another Duke Ellington song, by the way. So I'll play a little bit. I'll play a little bit of Don't Get Around Much Anymore. And then if anybody wants me to stop, just yell. I told you I wasn't gonna work. It wasn't gonna work very well. I'm gonna stop right there. I haven't played this like seriously in a long time, so I feel like I have a good excuse not to play it very well. What I wanted to do was share with you really quickly that one of my goals eventually, as writers, we're all kind of like, I want to write my novel, right? And Jim, you've written a novel, many of you have written novels or these big book length projects. And I've, played this little bit of a song, and I have these chords in my head, like this B flat, G7, C. And I want to do that too. I want to have an achievement like that. And so I just wanted to share, like, I've been trying to write a jazz standard, and I know it's like impossible. I know it's not going to be, I'm not going to write an actual jazz standard, but I actually feel like I have these chords. I'm just going to play the few chords. I'm like, this is good. And now I need to write a melody, and I need to write lyrics. And so I'm halfway there, I feel like. So this is like an A chord of some kind. I don't know. It's just like sounds right to me. I feel like it's okay. These chords go really well. I'm halfway there. Yeah, so I'll stop, and like, if I see people are in the chat, but I don't know if anybody wants me to talk more, or if Jim, your tea's getting cold.
So Jeremy, I have a theory, and you're kind of supporting it, that people are either really good at playing by ear or they're really good at playing with music, and that they don't tend to do both. Because I'm on the opposite spectrum of put music in front of me and I can totally play it, but you're rattling off chords, and I'm like, that you're speaking a different language.
It is a different language. It really is. And I think that's because, I don't know, did you learn when you were younger to read music?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've played since I was 7.
And I don't. I also,
you can improvise. You can improvise. I can't.
So, yeah, sort of. Yeah, I can improvise a bit, but I do think you're right. It's a different language. It's a different relationship to the song. I remember when I was, this was years ago, 20 plus years ago. I was living in Indianapolis, and I remember a friend of mine who was a guitarist, and he was trying to learn jazz guitar. Like you learn playing guitar and you're learning like strumming chords, and my friend wanted to actually learn to play actual jazz music. And it was a completely different experience. And he was going to these open mics and sitting in with actual jazz musicians, and a guy who was a great jazz guitarist in Indianapolis at the time. He said, all you need to know is the changes. I always felt like that was a profound thing to say, just like, it's like one of these things that stick with you. You just need to know the changes. And he was meaning just the chord, like, not even like B flat and G7, but like, what's the relationship between those two things? I can't say I have that deep of a relationship with music, but I'm more interested in the changes, I suppose, than what's literally on the page. Like, for instance, like there's the C minor chord. The C minor 7, I didn't realize like a C minor 7 is basically like an E flat. I never realized that. It's an E flat with a C in the bass. It's the same exact notes. And so that relationship, until I started like poking around in music, I would never have understood the sort of inherent relationship between those two. And, it goes, all the way up and down the keyboard, which for me feels like very logical, as opposed to the fretboard of a guitar or the strings of a harp, which I know, Sheila, you play.
But a harp is basically the white keys of a piano. So
my grandpa played it.
So Jeremy, when did you take up piano? Like 5 years ago, or?
Yeah, when was it? When was my sabbatical? 16? Yeah, 4 years ago. Yeah, something like that.
And you hadn't taken much before then?
No, I've never taken piano lessons. I remember in music class in high school that they taught, like, I learned some basic music theory about how chords are formed. And then, I remembered that. And that when I sat down the piano, and of course, like online nowadays, you can learn basically anything you want. So if I had questions, I would Google it. There's still things I'm baffled by, but interested in,
Mm-hmm. So I studied music seriously for 3 years, starting like when I was 25. That's when I learned piano. And it's never too late to learn piano.
Yeah.
And I was just fascinated with all the different things that you're talking about. And I love the daily practice of scales and arpeggios and things like that. It just really does take your mind off of things. So I encourage students to take up a musical instrument and just practice. Don't worry about a mastery. It's really something, isn't it?
There's a quote that's going around the internet. I think it's fake, but it's from Kurt Vonnegut. He's like Mark Twain. Everyone just like attributes something to him. And he was talking about whether this is true or not is beside the point. But, he was talking about he was working at this archaeological dig when he was a teenager. And he told the guy at lunch, on lunch break, what he was about. He was like, I'm in theater. I do choir. I take art classes. And the guy was like, oh, that's really great that you're into so many things. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not very good at any of them. I'm really bad at them. In fact, I'm not an excellent anything. And the guy convinced him that wasn't the point. The point was to have had all of these experiences. And Bill, I think you're right, that the process and the experience of doing it way more important to me than being good at it or messing up. Don't get around much anymore, which I seriously have not played in a long time. So I have a good excuse not to have played it well. Jim, is how?
Yeah, so I was going to say we are coming up on the half hour, and it was my promise to get everyone out of here after a short conversation. So you want to I think you should still play us out, though.
There's a song, Havana, that my kids listen to on Kids Bop. Do you know Kids Bop radio? Emma's laughing here. And then, it's a really cool song. So I learned it, and it's a simple song. Thanks for inviting me, Jim.
That was great.
All right. Wait, I was going to give you the Zoom clap. There you go. All right.
Or one of these.
All right. Oh, hey, well, thank you for coming out, everybody. Just want to let you know that next week, Alyssa Minch will I'll be speaking with her about her experiences with fan fiction, which is something that I teach. But when I had her in a class, I realized she knew way more about it than I did. So I decided I'm going to pay homage where it's due and find out from one of the masters. So thanks for coming out. Hope everyone's having a good time of it. Hope to see some of you next week. Take care. Thanks, Jeremy.
Bye.